Hello, welcome to the January 2nd, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. My ability to answer the questions in real time will soon be eclipsed. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if you could just refrain from repeating the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're using, whether it's Cubase, LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or if you are using versions 11, 12, 13, and which operating system, that information will be helpful. We should have an index of all the topics covered in the live stream posted and pinned with timestamps to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. But if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And I want to give a special thanks to Jan from Stockholm for creating the website. We also want to give a special shout out to two people that serve as moderators. Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to make it a better community, and we appreciate all of their efforts. And we'll also give special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord site, which is a wonderful resource for people in the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching and attending the live stream live, or even if you're watching it afterward, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from throughout the whole world, and I'm looking forward to starting a whole new year of live stream. So let's go ahead and get going. All right, so with that... Okay, so Zephaniah asks, how do you add delay on a vocal part without adding another track using Artist 10 on PC? Okay, so let's say we have, just let me open up just a quick, see if I have just a quick file here. Let me just load up a vocal file.
No, got me high, I'm twisted. Don't know how I'm thinking, but my mind.
Okay, so let's say we have this as our vocal file, and we want to put just maybe like, sometimes it's often called maybe like a little throw delay, something like that. So we'll come over here. So we'll just listen to our file and say, okay, we'll just have our vocal.
Got me high, I'm twisted. Don't know how I'm thinking, but...
So let's say I want to take the word thinking here and I want to put a delay on it. So you can do this in Cubase Artist or Pro. If you want to just kind of select the phrase and how long you want the delay to go, we go to the audio menu and we will go to processes, or we could just go rather to plugins, and I'll just say we'll go to my default collection. Let's put on a mono delay. I want to make it, let's say, a dotted quarter note. So what this will do is render the file. We didn't have to add a track. So now as we listen to it,
thinking, but my...
So let's listen to the whole file.
Thinking.
Change my start mode here quickly.
Got me high, I'm twisted. Don't know how I'm thinking, but my mind is set.
And if I wanted to change my delay time and update my delay time, so say I want to do like an 1/8 note delay, we can now listen to it.
Don't know how I'm thinking, but my mind is set on crazy love.
And if you wanted to add tails, you could also add that here, or if you just kind of select directly in the particular file. So we say, okay, I just want to take this phrase here, and with my range selection, and once we're here, we could also get to this is the direct offline window, but we could just come over and say, okay, we want to do our mono delay as set to 1/8 notes, So now that will render that particular file out.
But my mind is set on crazy love.
So that's a kind of an easy way of doing it. One other method would be to, if we had a delay effect, so let's say we have a mono delay, we could just automate the send. So we'll come over here, let's choose our send effect. So we're gonna open up our delay and we could automate this particular track. So let's say we'll click on the W button.
Got me high, I'm twisted. Don't know how I'm thinking.
And let me we'll just send this to our delay. And we'll make sure that the delay is heard. So we'll unmute the delay. So now when we listen, we could just select our vocal track and we'll go to our send here.
Got me high, I'm twisted. Don't know how I'm thinking. But my mind is set on crazy love.
So you could just automate just a delay send as well. But I think kind of the fastest way is just kind of select the range using the range tool. And then if you go to your audio menu to plugins, you could just set your delay and that will apply the delay without having to add another track. So give that a try. All right, and we had a question that was submitted. I saw it on yesterday during the when I was just kind of checked. Someone had submitted kind of an earlier question, and the question was how to select events to the right of the cursor. So let's say we have events that are set here. We have events and one long event here. So let's say my cursor is in the middle of the event. So what we want to do is to select all of the events after the cursor. But let's say we had events that were spanning before and after the cursor. So I created a project logical editor preset for this. So let's come over here. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is to make sure that that's not contingent upon a selected event. So in the pre-process, I just did a edit select none, and then I want to split all of the events at the cursor position. So if we have events that are before and after the cursor, we want to split those events. And then what we're going to do in the project logical editor is to select. We're going to say media type is equal to Midi, or for the Boolean condition, it may default to and, but we want to choose Midi or audio, and we could add, other tracks as well. And so we're going to take all of the Midi and audio, and we're going to select all of those where their position is set to beyond the cursor. So if I did this right, it's going to split these particular events and select all the events to the right of the cursor position. So we do that. And now all of those particular events on all tracks will be selected. And if the cursor is on top of an event that's starting before and goes after the cursor position, it will automatically split those particular values. So that's how you could, again, we want to select none and we want to split a cursor for the pre-process. We want to say media type is equal to Midi or, in the Boolean condition, or audio, and we want to select the position is beyond the cursor. And for our filter conditions here, we would just want to choose select. So again, we do that right. I can move my cursor here. It will now, we go to the project logical editor. We can now just run this project logical editor, and everything that's from that cursor on will be selected just like that. All right, so we see from Alexander Plasko. Hi, Greg. Happy New Year. Will any version of HALion or Groove Agent load LM4, Mark 1 or Mark 2 drum kits, or do I have to use Translator? I know I could build my own in HALion, so I haven't played with that in a long time. I may have to dig up some old LM4 kits, but I think that there might be a way just loading it directly into Groove Agent. Let's see if it works. I know all the samples can be dropped into HALion quite easily, but let's take a look at Groove Agent SE. So I think if you import the kits, I don't have a kit to try, Alexander, but if you have a kit that you could share with me, so I don't have to go dig through CD-ROMs in storage, but I think if you just come right here and we say import, that I know we could import like MPC programs, but I think that this would allow you to import LM4 kits. And for those not familiar, LM4 was kind of one of the first, I think it was the first software drum machine. It's going back to 1999, 2000, something like that. So, but give that a try just by going into just right-clicking on the agent and choosing import. And I think that the LM4 kits will load up, but I haven't tried it in years and years or decades. But if you have a kit that you could share and maybe put it on Dropbox or WeTransfer, I could test it out. But you could give that a try, and I think that will work for you. All right, so we see Cool Dude just saying hi, Greg, and Cubase Nation wishing everyone a Happy New Year. I hope everyone's holidays were as joyful and relaxing as mine were. All right, so we see Die Audio asks, I was wondering if there's a way to change the default audio algorithm from Elastic Pro Time to standard mix. Elastic Pro Time introduces artifacts very fast. So when we go, all you have to do, I think if we go to your preferences, and let's go to editing to audio, that you could just change the default warping algorithm right here. So you could change the warping algorithm based on that, and if you go to the pool window, you could also select all of your files. So if we select the top, hold down Shift, select the bottom, you can change the different, you could change all of the algorithms at once, just like that as well. And our question, are there any future plans on overhauling and updating that algorithm? So usually that algorithm is kind of used by a number of different companies. I think, so it's a kind of an industry standard algorithm, and it's, usually pretty highly regarded. And, that's going to be done, just trying to remember the company that does it. It's like Synaptic, I believe. So, but most of the times people have had really good luck with it. I haven't heard any plans, but maybe if you could reach out, you might be able to reach out to Synaptic with that. All right, so we see Stefan checking in from Sweden, and Mohammed Salah just wishing everyone a Happy New Year. Jeff Stanton has no questions today. He's just here to listen. Wish everyone a Happy New Year from London. Thanks for joining us. We see Peter wishing everyone good health and happiness from Montreal. Rich Schweitzer just wishing everyone a Happy New Year from Palm Beach. We have Uno Memento from minus 29 degrees in Finland. It says Zinasana just came in from 90 degrees. So, All right, so we see, hi Greg, how can I find the tempo of a reference track I load into Cubase? Okay, so we'll just do, there's a couple different approaches to this. So one is I'll just import a quick audio file into this project. Okay, so let's come over here and so one of the things you could do now is if we just go to your tempo field here, we can say, okay, I just want to, we go to the tap tempo and we could change now since we could do display only. So if you want to just kind of tap along, this will display kind of the tempo. So you could get the tempo sense from there, but you could also, if you wanted, if it was fluctuating in tempo, is just to come to project menu and do a tempo detection, and we could analyze the results here. So let's go ahead and so now at this point we can say, all right, this is where our tempo started, and I want this to be in, we'll go to our signature track, and we'll just make that 4/4, and at this point we could see all of the tempo changes. So just take the track volume down. And now we've figured out the tempo of that particular track. So that's how you can do it. So you could select the event, go to your project menu to tempo detection, and go from there. All right, so Benny from Sweden is wishing everyone Happy New Year as well. All right, so we see Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, Happy New Year. I grabbed an audio event and placed it into the sampler control, but can't get it to play or amend its characteristics in sampler control. It just plays its track. All right, so when we do this, so let's say I grab my sampler control, I'm going to come here, and once we drag it in, we don't want to play the audio file, but it's going to create a sampler track, and we see that indicated by this particular icon. And now I could play it. So if you're playing from the particular event, it's going to play back the audio file. Once it's in the sampler track, you drag it down, select the sampler track, and you could and now you can play it and manipulate it in the sampler track. So make sure that you don't have the audio track selected, but that you have the sampler track that was created as soon as you dragged it into the sampler control. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we have Lowell Sec or Seek just saying hi Greg, so thanks for being here. We have Ashish wishing everyone a Happy New Year. All right, my chat field just jumped, so let me. All right, so Mohammed Salah says, I have a problem when the mixer is already open. I use the logical editor in the lower zone, like velocity, set random values between them. I want to change the number. Cannot only if I close the F3. Okay, so let's say if the mixer is open, I'll come here and I'm going to just, now let's create a Midi. Event here. So I'm going to grab my Midi event. And let's just paint in some notes. Okay. All right, and when we look at our velocity here, okay, so let's say I want to randomize the velocity with the Midi logical editor. So I'll just set up the Midi logical editor here. So let's say velocity now we'll do this to, I'm sorry, Midi notes. Okay, so let's say when we do this, we can, so now we can come over, I'm going to select the events here, and if I did this right, okay, so now we can randomize the notes, but when we open up our editor, so when the mixer is open, and it could be that when this has the focus, that when we hit apply, that it's not, I think it's going to be a matter of window focus, so you may have to select this as the main event and, perhaps select the event that you want to. So I think it's really just a matter of window focus. So if we look at, say we're going to, we have this selected. So we go to our mixer. So say the mixer is open. We have our event selected here. I'll hit apply. So I think that this needs to be the active window. And now that we do this, we could do this, the velocity, but if the mixer is the window, so depending on which window is the active window, it may need to have particular aspects that are selected for the Midi data to be processed. And if the Midi data isn't actively selected and your mixer is, then that's what's causing it. So, so if you have this window open, and let's say we have my project window over here, so, but this is the active window, and I go to my logical editor, that we can't even open it because this isn't the active window, because we can't do Midi logical editing on the particular mixer. So that's why some things may not be accessible, because it's not currently selected. So you can, you can't necessarily open the score editor from the channel because the Midi events themselves aren't selected. So I think it's probably just a matter of, window focus for that, but let me know if that makes sense. All right, wonderful to see Soren from Sweden. We have Acoustic Beats sending love from India. Thanks for joining us. Great to see Detlef back on from Dusseldorf. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Emmanuel Maureen checking in from Quebec City, Canada. Thanks for joining us. We have Ashish checking in from Nepal. All right, so it's probably very late there, so thanks for joining us. We have Robbie Bowling saying hello, Greg, from Dallas. All right, Anatol Bagrin saying Happy New Year from Dublin. Thanks for joining and being on today. All right, so we see from Tinkerman MPE question just says, can you please show if and how Cubase is able to record one track with MPE data and then record a second take on top of that, not just overdubbing the expression data, but adding notes. Okay, so let me just I don't have an MPE controller connected to my system, but let's say we will. Okay, so let's. All right, so I'm going to come over here. Let's do some note expressions. Let's say I want to change my tuning on this. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to now set my MIDI record. So we have MPE data on here. So we can see the note expression. And I'm going to change my MIDI record mode here to merge. All right, so say now. Just switch this to. So now you can see that the MIDI with the MPE data here, and we just recorded the MIDI note directly on top. So there's the MIDI note that I just recorded. So you can hear that the pitch bend is applied only to this note and not to other notes directly there. So let me know if that makes sense. If that's what you wanted to do it's for Tinkerman. All right, so we have the Pentagon Audio Manufacturer says, Happy New Year, Greg. You're a great company while working. Love the show. Cheers from Portugal. Thanks for sneaking on while you're at work. We won't tell your boss. All right, and we see Martin from Germany wishing everyone a Happy New Year. And we have Diamond District Studios. It's great to see you back from Cape Town in South Africa. All right, so we see question. When adding a new track on the mixing console, the new track is being placed in the middle zone. Is there a solution that the new track is placed on the left zone automatically? All right, so let's come over here. Let's go to, let's say, our mix console here. So we could have different tracks in different zones. I'm going to go to my visibility and then select zone. So I'll just put a couple of tracks in my left zone and a couple of tracks fixed to the right zone. So as we scroll over, that these tracks are kind of anchored. So I think by default, when we go to add a particular track, that it will be placed into the middle zone by default, but we'll give it a try. So let's say we want to add, you can select this track because where it shows up here is going to be independent of that. So let's just come over, add an audio track, and we'll say left zone. So it's going to be added in the center zone because not everyone may see that, but if it is set up here, you could just quickly click on the dot. But I think by default, because a lot of people may not be so aware of the zones, that it's always safer to put it into the middle zone. But I'll pass it along as a feature request where maybe during the add track process that you could anchor it to left or right zone. But if we do that, when we go to different mix consoles, because we could have the lower zone mix console and if we go to our studio, each of these mix consoles can have independent zones as well. So it's really more of a function, not of the track itself, but of the mix console. But I'll pass it along as a feature request, but I don't think it's possible currently. Wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Hope you're doing well. Had a wonderful Christmas. All right, Tim Brinkley asks, how would one set up a 5.1 monitoring solution with Cubase 13 Pro with an audio interface that has 6 outputs available using the control room? All right, so what I would do is come to the audio connections, go to outputs, and we want to add a 5.1 bus. Okay, so we add a 5.1 bus, and then at this point, we're going to choose not connected. We will go to our control room. I'll just delete the monitor here. Okay, and now what we're going to do is add a monitor, and instead of the configuration being stereo, we want this monitor to be 5.1. Now here is, we can say this, we'll call this surround, and this is where we would set up your 6 outputs. So 1 through 6 is probably going to be channel 1 and 2 for your left and right, 3 and 4 for centers, and LFE, 5 and 6 for surround. And what you want to do at that point is make sure that all of the tracks, instead of going to the stereo output, are going to the 5.1 output. Then once you're in your 4th monitor setup here, so say you get a monitor D, at that point you could just have one volume control for your 5.1 mix, and you'd be able to do down mixing from 5.1 to quad to stereo to mono once you have the outputs configured. So set up, go to audio connections, set up the outputs. You want to add a 5.1 output, set these to not connected. We want to route all of the tracks to this 5.1 output. Go to your control room and add a monitor and make sure that the monitor is set up when you go to add the monitor, that we do it in the configuration of 5.1. And then that's really kind of all you need to do, and have fun. All right, great to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, Martin asks, since new vocal chain in Cubase 13 is realized as a VST plugin, I guess, will it be possible to use it in other software products as well, or is it bound to Cubase only? So I think that, most DAW plugins are kind of tied to the specific DAW. So, and I believe that's the case with the vocal chain as well, that you wouldn't be able to run it as a VST3 plugin in third-party hosts, but only within Cubase itself. All right, so OVJ asks, hey, is it worth purchasing Cubase Elements 13 or should I just go for another DAW? So it's definitely worth getting Cubase Elements 13. So, if you're starting off in the Steinberg family, Cubase Elements is a wonderful solution. It's incredibly cost effective. As if you do grow out of it, some people will stay in Cubase Elements and do everything that they need to. But if you need to jump up to get more functionalities and features as your needs and your desires grow with additional functionality that are offered in Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro, you could always update, or you could always upgrade from your Cubase Elements to Artist or Pro, and you don't really lose any money doing that. So, you get a discounted upgrade. So it's a wonderful way to kind of get started in the Steinberg family. So I think it's a great way to go. And we hope you do it. And thanks for being on the live stream. And welcome to the Steinberg family soon. All right, we see Dallas LaRue just saying hi from Las Vegas, wishing everyone a Happy New Year. All right, and we see Lanewood Studios on, wishing everyone a Happy New Year. Glad you can make it today. And Spike Williams from Rhondda in Wales. All right, so we see Val just says, currently having some issues with error messages, still trying to figure out what excuse me, Cubase-VST3-set is and why it causes so much error. So generally, when it's referring to that, that means it's kind of the collection of included plugins. I know I'm still kind of catching up. I tried to, take off over the holidays. I had a week off, so I tried not to do work. So I may have some emails to respond to. So apologize if I think I may have saw an email come in that wasn't able to respond to yet, but it's my first day back today. So, but I'll take a look at that, Val. All right. So I have RFB wishing everyone Happy New Year from Holland. All right, we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, and he wants everyone to whack the like button, and he'll be holding virtual ice cream distribution up if people don't do it. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. Just find my spot. Sorry about that. So lots of questions in my feature. Okay, so we see from Shantanu Dev says, Happy New Year to everyone. Sir, I don't see any pop-up window when I click Control Panel to adjust latency figure. Am I doing something? Am I doing some mistake? All right. So this could depend on your audio interface. So when you come over to adjust a buffer size, the vast majority of audio interfaces, when you click here, you click on Control Panel, will pop up the control panel. Like here we can see on Mac OS, the core audio. Some interfaces, I think Motu comes to mind. You have to actually go into the software for the interface to adjust a buffer size, but like 99.5% of interfaces, you click on a control panel, you could adjust the buffers. If not, you may have to open up the little applet for your audio interface. So. See, Michael Pierce says that's quite the snare. So it was the very early 90s. So I think it was an Alesis D4 if it's the lucky number track. So I think it's Alesis D4 with a Lexicon LXP1 if memory serves right. All right, so we see Tiago just saying hello from Brazil. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to have more than 9 workspaces? Is it possible to have a shortcut like the marker to X, which is amazing? So I think that workspaces might be limited to, I think we could have global workspaces. And you could also have project. So let's see, 1, 2. All right, let's see if we can add. So it looks like you could add more, but let's see if there's the keyboard shortcut to do that. Yeah, so there is a workspace X. So if you do that, then at that point you could just hit workspace X, and then it could open up additional. Then you could just type in the workspace number right there. So it looks like just go to workspaces and key commands and set up workspace X, that you could just type in the number like you do with markers. All right, so we have Antoine Van Kampen just saying best wishes for 2024. Thank you very much. All right, and his question is, if I click and drag the track list divider in a project window and this divider is reset and I close and reopen a project, is it possible to lock this position? All right, so let me set this up. I'll do a quick divided track list. Okay, so let's say I have this set up. Let's say that's my... So I'm going to save the project. All right, and I'm going to open the project again. We'll see if it's preserved. So it looks like saving the particular project will maintain the position. So let's say if I come here, let's revert to saved. We should see this jump down again. Yeah. So it looks like the height of the sizing of the divided track list will be preserved when saving the song. Always wonderful to see Pablo on from Galicia, España. So I just played bass on a couple new Hot Mess songs, Pablo. Looking forward to hearing your drum parts, and did such a wonderful job on the Christmas songs. I thought the drum parts were really great on that, and hope you and your family are well. All right, so Tim Weinheimer asks about the upgrade license for Cubase Pro 13, which comes with Spectral layers 10.1. I've not upgraded to full version of 10. How do I select using version 9 in Cubase 13? So with that, So with spectral layers, so spectral layers is kind of a single license. So what you might want to do, and let me just reread the question. So if you don't install, because what happens is you see a spectral layers license and it should open up that one. But when I go to my inspector and we look at my extensions at this point, while I have Spectral Layers Pro installed, we could say, okay, we go that, and because I have Cubase 13, I would also have Spectral Layers 1 and Spectral Layers Pro. But since one is a subset of the features of Spectral Layers Pro, when I have the Pro license, it doesn't allow me to run the two different versions. I haven't tried it, but you may want to uninstall, so I'm not sure if when you have Spectral Layers 1 version 10 and Spectral Layers 9, if it will allow you to run, to switch between the different licenses. But you may want to uninstall version, Spectral Layers 1 version 10, and then version 9 would work. I could do some experimenting with that, Tim. If you want to email me afterwards, after the live stream, you could send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, great to see the Monk Beats back on. Sending all the best to people from Italy. All right, so question, if I click and drag the track list divider downwards, then another slider appears on the upper right corner next to the upper track list. What is the purpose of this control slider? Okay, so let's say if I take a number of different tracks here, and let's say I have different tracks in my divided track list, what this slider would allow you to do is to navigate vertically within the divided track list. So if we come here, let's just put some more tracks in. So now what we could do is navigate vertically. I think this is maybe what you're referring to, within the upper divided track list or within the lower divided track list. So if you have like 16 tracks of drums up here and other tracks down here, you can just have kind of two independent track lists that you can navigate vertically like so. So let me know if that's what you're talking about. All right, you see Michael Teams granted Michael Pierce 1 gallon of coconut almond rum ice cream. So. All right. So we see Alexander Plasko just says, I tried to import the LM kits and Groove Agent didn't see them. The XXL kits is what I wanted to revisit. Probably a waste of time and disappointing. Thanks anyways, Greg. Yeah, if you want, if you're able to share the kit with me, I could see if I could get it in. But if it's like one particular kit, I may be able to kind of replicate it. If you want to share the content kit with me, if you're able to do that, or if you let me know the exact kit in email, I can see if I could dig it up as well. All right, so you see from OVJ, question, is Cubase Elements suitable for making my own song, recording just vocals and guitar? So certainly you could do that and much more. So if you want to do all your Midi stuff, if you want to do your editing and mixing, so you could definitely do that with Cubase Elements. All right, so we have Stephen Mike, or Stephen Michael 1, just saying hello. Thanks for being on today. All right, so a question. We have a question from Sweden. Is there any similar EQ like FabFilter Pro Q3 in Cubase? So I don't use FabFilter, but I think a lot of people could get very similar functionality by using the frequency EQ. It may look a little bit differently, but I think the functionality will be very similar. So once you come here, we could choose whether you have 8 bands. Each band could be dynamic as well. So if you wanted to just kind of click where you could see all of the bands, or if you want to specialize and just activate different EQ bands, we could come over here. Now, when we're kind of working with this, we have the ability to have 8 bands. We could just type in the particular notes. So we can say, okay, I'm on band 5. I want this, my song is in the key of G, so I go to G4. And we could choose the emphasis of that. So we could actually just type in the note name. We could choose for this to work in stereo. We could choose for this to work in mid-side, where I want to EQ only the left and right. If we're imagining this is our panning spectrum, like left, center, right, we could EQ the sides or the mid range independently, even with different Q factors. We could also just click on it to have independent left-right EQs for each band. Clicking on the dynamics, we could come over here and have full dynamic EQ control. This is, the EQs themselves can be in linear phase. So if you wanted to come over and be able to, work with the different EQs or just work with these, so experiment around with frequency. I think you get the same results. It may not be like as zoomed in a view, but I think that you could get very similar results with the frequency EQ included with Cubase. All right. All right, just reading through questions. All right, so we have from Zedmog Engineering and Mastering Engineer. It says, I have a question. How does latency compensation work while using analog gear via insert? So if we go to our studio menu here and let's go to our audio connections, let's say we have an external effect. So let's say, okay, we have a distressor and we have this connected. So by the time the audio signal goes out and goes back into the session, that could, by the time it leaves your audio interface, latency, if you have a digital reverb, that could add a lot of latency just in the conversion stage and back. So how Cubase would compensate for that is just to come over and let's say we're running an external plugin. We say, okay, let's get to our distressor. We see this little thing that says measure delay. We click on this. That kind of pings the audio path of the system and will automatically now compensate for that. So to compensate for outboard gear, once it's configured, when you go to instantiate or you go to load the outboard gear here, at this point we can just we'll just say, okay, let's get to the inserts, to external processing, to our distressor, click on measure delay, and then that will do all the compensation for your outboard gear as well. Okay. All right, so we see Glenn Weldon asks, can you please show how to add CC1 mod wheel after the fact? Okay, so if we want to, let me just open up a come here. Let's open up an instrument track. Let's do maybe like an organ. Hang on a second, just have to respond to quick text for a Stevie Wonder configuration issue here. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and find just a quick all right, so let's say come over let's do a new project here quickly. Try this. All right, so let's say we want to record a CC modulation or CC1. Okay, so let's say we have a project here, and I'm going to put it on the rate control room. Okay, so let's say we want to now just record CC1. So if we want, we can just come here and I'm just going to select this channel. If we don't have the editor open, just hit record. And we could record the CC data. And when we go to look at it, we can see that we have our modulation data that I just recorded. So and this is when we have this set to MIDI record mode to merge. Now there's also another, if we wanted to do this within the editor itself, if we come over to your preferences, we have a special mode for we go to, I think it's under record MIDI, that we could say replace recording in editors. So if you have existing CC1 data on your track, we could now come over and I think if we place this into let's see if so now that we're in the editor, we can make sure that we have recording in editor turned on, and now I could just record my CC, my modulation data within the editor itself. So let me know if that makes sense. So the preference, again, if you have existing automation or not automation necessarily, but let's say CC data, that we can come over, and now that I hit record, I can just and let's see if I need to maybe put this into replace. So if I have it kind of in replace mode, I could just kind of but that's how you could just record CC1 data into an existing event. But you could always just select your modulation here and draw in as well if needed. So. All right, so we have Biswayan Day, just saying Happy New Year from London. Thanks for joining us. All right, you see the Monk Beats. This was like number 39. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff says, sorry, Greg, still no joy with activating sampler control. I've selected to create its sampler track. Okay, still the original track plays, whether hitting play or the spacebar. 13 Pro, is it me? So if we're doing it from an existing project, so let's say we're here and just activate this. So let's say we're scrolling along here. So this audio file will still play. So if I come here and so, you know, if this audio event is on the timeline, just because it was dragged into the sampler control, so let's come over here to our sampler control, just because it was dragged in doesn't mean that this isn't still here. So if you wanted to, so that will continue to play unless you, so now when we play, nothing is going to play, but I could just trigger the sample directly from there. But if the origin sample is in the timeline, that's still going to play. So you can either mute it or erase it, and now just trigger it from the sampler control like that. So let me know if that makes sense. But if the original file is still in the project, it will play. If it's, you know, if the project position is over that. All right, you see Michael Pierce just says, off-topic question, can anyone recommend a 4 terabyte USB external drive for additional storage? I've had so many issues with them recently. I'm looking at Seagate. So I know a lot of people tend to favor the Samsung drives. Was it the T5 or T7? I think they're now at 4 terabytes. So that might be a good choice. All right, John Costigan wants people to hit the like button, saying it really helps. All right, so we have a question from Pablo. In Groove Agent, is there a way to not load the instruments you don't want? For example, I have a library on Agent 1 where I'll use everything except the hi-hats. So once you get like the preset kits, you know, they are going to, we'll just add a full instance of Groove Agent here. So when you load up like like one of the factory content like a Simon Phillips or Nashville drums, it's going to kind of load up the entire instrument. But what you could do, so let's go ahead and just take a look. Let's go to Groove Agent. So let's say we want to come over and we load up, let's load a kit with patterns. So see, I guess we just, let's say the Marco Miniman. All right, so this will kind of load up, you know, everything, you know, with the hi-hats. So let me just turn this up a little bit. So, you know, what you could do if you didn't want to hear the hi-hats is just on the pad itself, just mute. But, you know, these are all kind of set to load up all of the different samples, and realize that it's also loading up kind of different mic positions as well. Because like when you go to the overheads, let's say on this snare, that, you know, that it's picking up these sounds from, you know, like the room mics, that it's picking up the sounds from the other microphones as well. So you may hear, you know, just to be incredibly realistic, you may hear, you know, ever so slightly some of the snare bleeding through into the room mics and into the overhead mics. So, but there's if you have like one of the kits like Nashville Drums or Simon Phillips or the Marco Miniman, that when you do this, there isn't a way to just say I want to load just the drums and not the cymbals, but you could quickly mute the different sources that you want. So if you didn't want the cymbals to be triggered at all, that way they won't sound. So let me know if that helps, Pablo. All right, and we see the question is, can the rest of the instrument be downloaded from RAM? So if you're looking for saving the particular elements, if you click in Groove Agent, let me see where the particular, but there is kind of a, so if you just click here, you'll see this little icon for RAM. So let's say, you have, up to multiple velocity scales. What you could do is click on the little RAM button here, and that could do a quick analysis of all the samples that are actually utilized in your particular project, and that could unload the samples that aren't being used. So check out the RAM save mode, and then once that's activated, I think you may have to play it but at that point you could use that function to unload samples that aren't being used from RAM. And if you also wanted to allocate more RAM, if you go to options here, you could pick more of the balance between taking the samples from the hard disk versus RAM here as well. But definitely check out like the RAM save mode right there. All right, so you see from Tinkerman says, I was wondering how and if Cubase is able to redistribute channel pressure data on the second take. I can get it to work correctly, but did not use the merge record mode that you just showed. Thanks. Yeah, so I think that will do trick. I don't have an MPE controller handy that's connected to my computer now. I have one in a storage I could pull out if necessary, if you want me to do it for Friday's live stream. All right, Benny from Sweden just wants to know, wants everyone to hit the like button. All right. All right, we have Lawrence from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island, just saying Happy New Year to everyone. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see anything about the earlier question about the channel anchors, as in Cubase 12 was placed in the left zone as default. I don't remember it, but let's could open up 12 quickly here. Take a look. Okay, so I'll just open up a quick project here. Okay, I will anchor a couple tracks here in the left, And let's say my right zone. All right, so I'm going to add an audio track here. We'll call it left zone. So we can see that there it didn't go to the left zone, it went to the center zone. So I think the behavior is the same. And let me see if I come here, if I have that selected and I add an audio track to a track that's in the left zone, we can see that it's still not added into the left zone. So let me know if I'm doing something differently in my Cubase 12 than you are, but it seems like the behavior is consistent between 12 and 13 regarding that. All right, so just see from Lawrence, so my chat field just jumped. All right, so I just see from Lawrence Koch, is there a way to set up? And then I don't see anything else. So maybe Lawrence, if you asked maybe a longer question, or maybe it'll be coming later, but that's all I see in the question so far, but hopefully we'll get to it. All right, so you see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Texas fresh strawberry ice cream. It sounds great. And I think you had the tempo work fine, so thanks for that. And Michael Teams again wants everyone to smash the like button. All right, so we see Pablo has bought the Nashville for Groove Agent for a job. It's great for the sales. I'll take the Marco Minimin, which I think best suits what you need. So, and he's just saying he won't forget the Simon Phillips, but it says everyone who uses Groove Agent needs Nashville. All right. All right, so we see from Eric, says VST Connect SE bug load very slow. Is there a fix? I did try taking network folder out, but now it's hidden. So sometimes I'm not sure if you're seeing like the VST Connect on the startup, where maybe it's taking a while to load up on startup. Sometimes it's not the plugin that you see that is causing the problem, but the plugin afterward alphabetically that is not loading could be the problem. So that may be an area to check as well, Eric. And you could check to see, like, if when you start the program, if you hold down Alt Control plus Shift or Command Option plus Shift, you could start it without third-party plugins, and if it starts up like kind of as expected with the VST Connect, then you know it's going to be maybe the plugin that comes after, and it could be alphabetically, that could be causing the problem that's not loading up, and it's stuck on VST Connect because the other plugin isn't loading. All right, so we see Pablo says the best way to enter the Cubase family is entering the Hangout with Greg. So I'm just fortunate I get to hang out with you guys. All right, so we see Eric ask, does Stream Deck XL with slideshow effects profile work properly? Thanks, Happy New Year. So I had bought a profile for Cubase just out of curiosity with my Stream Deck, and I had some problems with it, and I think it was with Cubase 11. And then I just kind of made my own profile. I'm not sure if it's been updated for 12 or 13. But I know that the Stream Deck works reliably with Cubase. So, but I can't really speak for the slideshow FX profile. All right, so we see question. At Media Bay, my loops sample are always offbeat with my 120 tempo at 4 bars. How to fix this to match my BPM? So let's say we are, we're playing our tempo, and let's say we're at like 120. So when I go to my Media Bay, and we could audition different loops. So let's come over here, and one of the things that you can set is you could say, okay, align beats. So if that is turned off, it plays at its original tempo. But if I click here, now it's playing back in time. But if I take that off, so make sure that you have the aligned beats enabled, and then whatever kind of the origin tempo of the audio, it should. But again, turning that function off right there, that mouse click, will make sure that it's not aligned. So just make sure that you have the aligned beats icon enabled right there. All right, we see that Pablo and Michael Pierce have colds, so sorry to hear that, guys. Hope you get better soon. My son was sick a little bit before Christmas as well. Michael Teams is wondering where Nick is, and he's there. All right. He's lurking in the background. All right, so Pylon Records asks, Happy New Year, everyone. Greg, is there a way to nudge audio and MIDI part by the smallest increment, basically having snap off and nudging parts with key command? The arrow key doesn't work for me. Thanks. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. So when we have this set, we can say, okay, we'll say our nudge. So I'll just come over here. We'll make sure our nudge palette is visible. All right, so we see our nudge palette. We could link it to the grid. So I come, and now I could hold down the arrow key. So right now this is set to beat. So I hold down control or command key plus the right arrow key, and it's going to nudge the event. I hit the left arrow key, the right arrow key. It's going to nudge it by one beat. So as we do this, so control or command plus the arrow key. Now if I wanted to do that to the nearest quantize, we could say use the quantize value, and if my quantize is set to, let's say, 16th note, I could come here, and now we could nudge it in intervals of a 16th note. If we see where it says link to grid, we can now come over here and choose different time values. So we can say, so now I could link it to the grid, and we could say, I want to use seconds. So when we say, so now as we nudge, we can nudge it not in terms of beats, but by seconds. So we can now just come over here, and even if we want to choose to link to time code, and here we could say, so let's say we want to link to seconds. We could say, okay, I want to move it to nudge it by 1 millisecond at a time. So now it looks like the white line is moving, but the actual event is moving to the white line. So we're nudging it in intervals of 1 millisecond. And let's say if you want to go to samples, at this point we could say I want to link it down to one sample. So we go down to 1/192,000th of a second. So if you look at, let's say, our start time, I'll switch this over to samples here. So if we look at our start position here, as I nudge, we can nudge in individual samples, and that's the highest resolution that you could have. So again, make sure that you have the nudge functions. When you could have the nudge set to link to your grid, or the nudge factors can be set independently down to the sample level. So it should be, that's the highest resolution you could have in a digital audio workstation. So that should be fine enough, but use the control or command plus the left or right arrow, and that will nudge it to the value that is set. All right. Donald Duck just asks, frequency masking in Cubase project with many instruments, orchestra project, etc. What is the fastest way to detect them? So a lot of times, it's one of those things. Often the best way to do detection is, using your ear, because if something is kind of covering the same frequencies, let's just open up a quick orchestral piece here. But I mean, you could see what's going on pretty easily. So let's say we'll come over here, we'll open up, let's say, supervision. So let's say I'm worried about my bassoon and French horn. Or let's say bassoon and cello. So I think it's really just a matter of, you could see kind of what frequencies are. So we'll come over here, let's say to our so you can see which frequencies are, kind of accentuated here. But, there's really, not a, frequencies blending together themselves are what kind of make music sound great and what makes orchestral parts sound good. So, and interestingly enough, like the better orchestrated a piece is, the less frequency clashing there will be. It could be just a matter of orchestration with that often. But, most of the time when you're doing it, there's not going to be a reliable function that says, stop all frequency clashing, because that's what makes a mix, unique and individual. All right, wonderful to see the famed John Morales on the live stream. Glad you can make it today. Hope you're doing well. All right, we see Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas, wishing everyone a happy New Year. Always great to see Sable Winters from Bay Area on in California. Nick's wishing everyone a happy New Year. All right, Stephen Mike L1 wants people to hit the like button. All right. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see Perry Michael Allen says, the clinic student, hello from Amsterdam. Mr. Allen gave me the permission to ask you to go through crossing from the Cubase 13 demo to the full version of Cubase 13. So I'm not sure what, like if the question is about, migrating your license from a trial version to the full version. So once you would activate once you purchase a copy of Cubase, then you'll be fully licensed, and then the trial, but you don't have to reinstall or do anything. It's just with the trial version, the license would expire within 60 days, and once you purchase the program from a dealer or from the online shop, you could just at that point. So once you purchase the program, then that license won't expire because you have a full license. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question. All right, so you see Benny just asked, upgrading from Windows 10 to 11, no problem. What problems do you experience then? So I haven't done personally the Windows 11 update on my home studio. I'm kind of a I generally tend to leave the operating systems where I got them, but I wouldn't have any qualms jumping up to Windows 11. You may have to deactivate some things if you had kind of optimized your PC. But for most people, it's been pretty seamless. So I don't think you'd have any problems. All right. Wonderful to see Grant Nicholas, who's just saying that frequency is amazing. Great to see you on the live stream from Baltimore. Daniel Dumitru is wishing everyone a Happy New Year. All right, we have Bernadette wishing everyone a Happy New Year from the Republic of Ireland. Thanks for being online with us today. So we see Nick saying, how dare Mr. Wonder interrupt the live stream? I guess we'll let him off. It was his kind of guy who sets up his computers. So known him for probably 30 years. Dear friend of mine. But I'm sure Stevie is blaming him because he can't do his new record because he's looking for a new control surface. All right. All right, so we see Mikey's Beach says, I'm trying our Cubase 13 moving up from Cubase 12 Elements. Is anyone else having problems with Cubase seeing Groove Agent? So make sure that, I think it's going to be the same actual, same instrument, but make sure that you install the instrument from, the Steinberg download assistant for your Cubase 13. But make sure you do that because that will come with additional kits as well. All right, so we see question, can HALion be routed to record MIDI patterns? I don't think so, but you can drag and drop the patterns from, you could record into, so let's say if we wanted to come here, so let's open up this instance, and then if we go to, let's go to edit, the program that now we could add like a Flexphraser here. So let's say I want to take this, I want to do like a general string part. I'll just change my tempo here. All right, so if I have an event kind of like that, so I don't think that we could output MIDI directly from HALion, but we could come over here and record. So we could say, so as soon as we come here, and then we could stop recording, and then we could drag the event out directly to the project like that. But like Groove Agent is designed to record directly from the instrument, but within like the Flexphraser, we could now just come here and record the pattern and drag and drop that pattern into the project in HALion Sonic or HALion 7. Okay. See Pablo just saying, Greg said my favorites. All right. I'm trolling him, wanting him to purchase more Groove Agent expansion kits. So I think it's a good investment. All right, so we see a question from Cycling is Awesome, just saying I can't pre-listen to... Sorry, my chat field just jumped. So Cycling is Awesome asks, I can't pre-listen to the media-based samples. Menu on the right, what can I do? So make sure that when you're listening to loops here, that what you want to do is to make sure, so if you're not hearing them immediately, try going to your audio connections, and you want the output here to be not connected, but you can set the control room. So I have under my Yamaha HS7s, I have my control room here set to connected. So now, as soon as I do that, now we can hear instantly. So make sure that you enable the control room set. So let's come over here. Let's say I'll stop playing this. Go to my control room. And I have my outputs. We can think of that these aren't really assigned to any outputs. So when I go to play, I don't hear anything. But now when we go to our audio connections and go to my control room, that now once that is set up, then you could audition all of your samples kind of as expected. All right, so we see how do I make my samples loop? I looked up tutorial videos, but still not working for me. I'd really like to use Cubase and skip Ableton. So a lot of times, what you do is, we could think of Cubase as, really kind of defined feature of the, the state of the art when working with kind of linear-based recording. So easy ways of doing this is just to come here, and, just take, like, if I wanted this to loop, just drag it onto your timeline. So there are some ways of doing kind of independent track loops if you wanted to, but the editor may have to be open. But I think it's so fast just to be able to come here and just say, let's do that. But if you wanted to do like an independent track loop, I'll show you, like for composing, I'll show you how to do that. Let's see if it's maybe under recent. Don't think so, but all right, let me just open up a quick project here to show you. So if it's more like a composing type scenario, so let's say I have just a quick project here. So what I could do, let's say I want this song to play, it's going to have kind of like an A-B. So it's like an AABA form. So what I could do is you could activate, if you wanted to, just right click here, and then you could see, I think it's an independent track loop or independent loop. Yeah, so you can see independent track loop, which you'll see, let's just find the icons, it's right here. So I'm going to set just a one measure loop. So now that that is activated, we can set kind of this aqua colored loop. So now this will play and do one measure, and I'll say, okay, let me just draw in. So this measure, this is playing like 24 bars loop. So now that this whole form is going to repeat, but this one measure is playing over and over and over again. And we can do this for audio. And then if you wanted to close the editor at this point, you could just say, okay, let's just drag that out, disable the independent track loop. So you could compose one beat while the whole song is playing over and over again. So that's, if you want to do that for audio as well, you could do it very easily. So same principle. So check out the independent track loop if that's what you want, or just, come here and drag it over to the right. It's really easy. All right. All right, so HALion Records is also recommending the Samsung T7 for Michael Pierce. All right, so Pablo has had his revelation with a little RAM save mode button. So I did it again to impress Pablo. So. All right. Okay, so you see Tinkerman says I could share his Cubase 13 profile for Stream Deck XL if you'd like. I created my own icons and covered many MIDI editing functions, 2 pages. Just tell me where to upload it to. So if you want to send it to clubcubase at steinberg.de, I'd love to check it out. Thank you. And I'm sure that that Jazz Dude could direct you to maybe others in the Discord would love to have access to it as well. All right, always wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Hope you had a great holiday season. We see David M. from Liverpool. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see how is it possible to modulate quick controls, for example, with Cable Guy's Midi shaper. So, if you have, let's say, if we are here, let's just go to, so let's say if I have volume control here, and I wanted to just automate. All right, so, if you wanted to, at this point, just say, okay, once you have the automation lane open, if you wanted to, at this point, just say, okay, let's switch our draw tool. So we'll just come over here, say, okay, I want this to be my parabola. I could just we could just choose kind of different. So let's say, okay, I want to do this as a sine wave. You could just do, different modulation controls, just like that, kind of using different tools. So that's one method of doing it. So check out some of the different shape tools that you could draw in. And then if you wanted to change the frequency of these, you could just hold down the shift key. So you say, okay, I want that to go roughly every bar. You could just change the frequency of that as well. So, but you could do that with the quick controls. You could just automate the quick controls, open up the lane, and draw in your modulation. All right, so we see a question from Raheem. In the piano roll, is there a way to select a set of notes and stretch them out while keeping the time relationship between the notes? Okay, so let's say, so I'm not sure if you want to just do like the sizing applies time stretch, where you could just do stuff like that, if that's what you want to accomplish. And if you wanted to just, resize each of the notes, you could do that. Or if you wanted to apply time stretch to the particular notes, you could adjust kind of like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking to do. Okay, Michael Jensen asks, is it possible, from Denmark, from a stormy and snowy Denmark, is it possible to use the feature color +1 on lane so it's easy to spot where the material comes from when I comp? So, with the lanes, I don't think that there is a way to automatically do it. So the lanes will automatically assume the particular track color itself. So let's see if I have this. So we open up our lane view. These would all be kind of the same. But they would have to be, they could be manually, recolored for, for the lanes themselves. So if we come here, let's just, we could color the lanes, but there isn't kind of an automatically increment the colors. I think a lot of people, I personally like being able to see all the same colors, and then because like colors don't really signify to me like the different takes. So when I come here, I could just see which ones are being utilized, but there isn't a way that I know to, but we could just come here and manually set the colors for different ones, but not, I could do it to tracks, but with the Project Logical Editor, but there isn't really a setting for navigating to the next lane automatically. So I think it has to be done manually that way, but I'll pass it along as a feature request. All right, so Pylon Records asks, Greg, is there a way to drag and drop multiple audio samples in the sampler track on different keys? I would not want to use Groove Agent if possible. Then what are my limitations in the sampler? Thanks. So the sampler track itself is going to be one sample in the sampler track. That's really the intention. So if you wanted to do so if you wanted to have more than one sample, you'd have to use something like, HALion or Groove Agent if you want to work with multiple samplers. But the sampler track itself is one sample per sampler track, just to kind of keep it nice, fast, and simple. All right, so we have John Barry just sending well wishes for the year from his storm-battered Devon, England. So stay safe in your storm, and glad you can make it. Okay, so we see just clarification on the question. Says, if there are 5 notes in one bar, can we stretch that to 2 bars where those 5 notes are almost playing halftime compared to what was previously there? All right, so let's go ahead and all right, so just put in some quarter notes here. I'll just do a quick step entry. So we could kind of do that. Now I think that there's also a way in the Midi logical editor where we could, I think it's one of the presets, so let's come over here. I think there's a double MIDI notes. So let's say if I just come here, I think we could double tempo, and let's see if that's what I was thinking of. Just take out step mode here. So I think we come here. So I think that we could do it kind of with these, but it's not kind of doing what I expect. But I think that I've done it before. Let me just look through some of the other presets and see. But also, let's say if I have this event here, let's see if we do sizing implies time stretch. So you could do it like that as well. So if you just want to select the particular Midi events, and then you could just stretch them to kind of fit. And you can actually have it snap correctly if you want. So you can play around with some of the stretching options with that. All right. All right, so we see question. I would like a quick demo on setting markers and stop play from certain markers. I use that a lot in other programs and cannot really figure it out in Cubase. All right, so let's say I'll just add a marker track here. All right, so I'll just drop in. All right, so if we have the marker track selected, so one, I think if we go to like, so with the marker track selected, we hit Alt or Option plus N, B, let me just, I think it's Alt. All right, let me just. All right, let's get my key commands figured out here real quick. All right, so let's say if we have the markers, we could just hit the left and right arrow keys. And now let's come over, and I think if we switch our transport, let's come here to start from selection start. So now I could just come over here. I want to start from marker 5, hit the space bar. I want to start from marker 8, We can now just navigate just hitting the space bar and the left and right arrows. So I want to go back to marker 3, stop, let's get a marker 6, hit the space bar. So you could navigate to the marker, and then when you go to transport, you could go to your start mode and you start from selection start. So you can now just go back a couple markers, hit the space bar, stop, and then go directly to that specific marker point. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right. All right, see, we had a bunch of questions that were sent in, so let me get to those. Thanks for everyone sending in their questions in advance. All right. And if you learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, let me just go to... All right, so a question. I'm getting a really weird problem in the audio connection setup for the control room tab. CD attached screenshot on Cubase 13, Mac OS, Sonoma. I'm getting multiple duplications of the presets under the presets drop-down list. If I delete duplicates the next time I open up Cubase 13, even more appear than before. It's like instead of deleting them, it copied them. I'm trying to figure out why and where these presets are being stored. Any idea what's going on and how to fix this? All right, so when we go to our audio connections menu, this is where the presets are being set up here. So we could see that when we go to the presets here, so if we have these kind of set up, and what he's seeing is multiple presets. So if we want to go, let's say, to a preset, just probably we did for Michael Pierce at some point, that we could just come over and just say we want to have, just, so let's say I want just a stereo preset here. So generally removing, just coming over here and remove, let's say I want to remove this particular preset, I'll come here and remove this preset, and then when we start Cubase, we won't see it again. Now, what happens sometimes if presets were stored in a previous version of Cubase, they could be automatically, and if they're referenced in a project, they might be replicating from preferences that are going to be stored in like maybe a Cubase 12 folder that it may reference when going to Cubase 13. And if that's the case, these presets are actually going to be stored, I think, in RAM presets.xml. So if you're on Mac OS, what you need to do is we'll come over here to your Finder. Let's hold down your Alt or Option key, go to Library, and go to Preferences. So you'll see Preferences, and then go to Cubase 13. So we'll scroll down, and you'll see under presets, one of the presets that you'll see will be RAM presets, and this is where those files are going to be stored. So if we right click here, I'm just going to open it with text editor. And if we scroll through this XML document, you'll see kind of all of the presets. So you could probably just delete the particular presets from the RAM XML file, and then it may not replicate from there. So it could be that the presets are going to be stored here, and when you start up, that if it doesn't see it, it may try to recreate it for you. So, see if you could manually delete them from the RAM presets.xml file right there. So, or you could try to just temporarily move it to a different location or rename it RAM presets.xm underscore. It should rebuild, and then you might be starting from scratch with your presets, but that should probably get rid of the duplicative presets that you're seeing in your audio connections menu. All right, so we had a question. It says on December 22nd, 2023, live stream questions about HALion Sonic right side panel, F6 user button, no user presets show up. It says Cubase 13 Pro. I've customized many presets in HALion Sonic 7, but in the right side panel, the user content is empty. How can my presets be visible in the user content panel? All right. So let's say if we go to add a HALion instrument here, I'll just jump over to a different project. Okay, so we have our HALion Sonic here. All right, so let's say, all right, so I want to change, let's say, a preset here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is right click directly here, and then we're going to save the program as, and we'll call it January 2nd, 2024. Okay, so we'll hit OK. So now when I want to come over to, I can see my factory presets, I can see user presets. So we'll come over here, and now if I want to, we'll cut this particular program. So we'll go to our user presets, go to all, look at user, we'll uncheck factory, we'll see our January 2nd, 2024. Now it shows up here. We can double click and all the settings I just made were automatically recalled. So instead of saving it as kind of like a plugin preset, save it as a program preset. So right click here, save the program as, and then it shows up in the right hand side. All right, let me jump back to live chat, see if we have some more questions coming in there. All right. So we see Nigel just says, I had an issue that I reported on one of these live streams with the latest update. It was fixed. Thank you. So you're welcome. So we see question, any tips with Backbone? So, Backbone is like a really creative tool. So if you haven't really explored it, it's part of Absolute 6. But it's kind of often considered like a drum synth, kind of a drum sound design tool. It has some AI functionality for creating different kick drums. But we'll just go ahead and open up some of the presets here you get with it. So especially it's like super ideal for working with different kick drums, but it's really, it's almost a disservice to limit it to that. But, as you kind of come over here, you could just drag and drop audio in and have your different samples. We could choose to do your synthesis options. Once you kind of jump back, you say, okay, I want to do my sample editing. I want to do, different pitch envelopes and the tonal aspects, as well as filters. And being able to do the amplifier section. So if you want to do your different envelopes, and what I think is really good check out some of the impacts. I think some of these, like Robert. And some of these will have like samples that will just kind of jump back at you as soon as you release a key. But these impacts are really great for doing different sound design functions as well. So let's say, so you have while it's doing a lot of different then as soon as you release the key, you can get stuff like that. So like great for risers. Then release the key. Let it kind of build up, and so all sorts of great stuff that you could do with Backbone. But you could explore it and spend like days just kind of coming up with really very creative sound design aspects. All right, so we have the purple saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Benny just saying, Greg, did you get my email? So I may have it later, but if you just want to type your question in, Benny, I'd be happy to kind of to address it. All right. All right, let me jump back to some of the other questions that were sent in. All right, so the question, in previous versions of Cubase, I had the option to click on retrospective recording within the inspector field on the left. It seems it's gone in Cubase 13. It's still there under the transport tab, but is there any way to get this option back in the inspector? All right. So let's say if I'm playing this HALion Sonic instrument here, let me just... All right, so I just played some Midi notes, and if we see right here, we'll see the insert recording. Then I could just say insert as linear recording, and then everything that I just played will be set up for my retrospective recording. So it's still there in Cubase 13. All you have to do is, let's say my position is here. I'm going to play. And from the inspector, we could just say insert recording, insert as linear recording, and then that would automatically just be placed right into the recording, right into the project just there. So you can still do, it's just insert recording. That's where you could load up the retrospective recording. All right, so we had a question. In Cubase 13, Mac OS Sonoma, when I resize a window, for example, when I open the studio setup options or audio connections, if I resize the window then and next time I open it, Cubase doesn't remember the last window size. It always defaults back to the initial default window size. I have to keep resizing the window to get it the way I like it. Is there a way to have Cubase remember the window size? Is there a setting I'm missing? It seems like a standard application thing. All right, so let's say if I come, I think it might be, so let's do our audio connections. I'll come and let's make it just come right there. So we'll resize that. Let's do a new project. And let's open up the audio connections menu. Let's see if I close out of Cubase, close projects here. All right, I'll quit Cubase, relaunch it. All right, so create empty. So the window here seems to be the same size for me, so I'm not sure if it's, I know that the first, release of OS Sonoma had a lot of graphics issues, so make sure that you have an update, but it seems like the window sizes are being maintained here even after restarting Cubase. So let me know if I did something differently. I'm not on Sonoma, but so just I'm on, I think, Monterey. So maybe it's a Sonoma issue. I know Apple resolved a lot of graphics issues with some updates to Sonoma that were initially introduced there. All right, so another question. You mentioned a while ago that Cubase doesn't have routing folders because these folders can hold more than just audio tracks, and you can edit these within a folder. However, markers don't get moved when you're editing a folder. Why is that? I think generally the markers are going to be set for like markers will generally be set, are designed for the position. So if we have like a marker track and audio within the particular folder here that, we move it, the contents will often move, but the markers are often specifically aligned to specific areas with, so when we move a folder, the markers are generally saying at this point in time we want that. But if we wanted to select the markers and a folder, we can move that together. But by default, most people would want the markers to kind of stay in the same position and not be moved with the particular folder. But if they are selected, they can be moved with the folder. All right, so we see, hi, how can I use HALion Sonic to automatically load HALion 1 tracks, but I don't have in my computer? I've received a lot of projects to mix coming from Cubase 5 with many tracks using HALion 1. Working on my PC with Cubase 13 now, everything is loaded except for the HALion 1 tracks because the VST is missing. I know that most of the HALion 1 sounds are in HALion Sonic SE. Is there a way of converting automatically those HALion 1 tracks to HALion Sonic, or any script/macro that could be created to do so? I don't even know what sound was used in the HALion 1, so I cannot do it manually. The tracks are too many. So I think that if you, I think that you could still download a version of HALion 1. So I think if we just come over, let's get to the Steinberg site. So HALion 1 is probably 13, 14 years old now. Let's get a download. So I think that you could still maybe download. I don't think it's going to be in here, but you might. So here is the, so if you go to the installation of the HALion 1 presets for Cubase 6 or later, I think that you could then have these load up into HALion Sonic. But if, because it's probably going to be 12 or 13 years old. But I think that all of this article could walk, so if you just look for installation of HALion 1 presets in Cubase 6 for later, so this will load it into the VST instrument of HALion Sonic. Here it's HALion Sonic SE, so I haven't tried this with the HALion Sonic, but I think it might still work. So I think if you download the presets, that may do the trick for you, utilizing that. But let me know if it's, if you have a particular project file, I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it as well. All right, so we see, says, when I recorded MIDI notes, it's still shift before the real time is played. I'm obliged to correct it manually every time. How can I do it automatically? Any script function? So a lot of times it could be just depending upon, and I think I may have an image of this. It's different than on the Mac OS version. So once you go to your studio menu, to studio setup, you'll see a MIDI port setup. And on the Windows, you'll have some functions here. So try to try checking, use system timestamp for MIDI inputs. That may fix it depending on the MIDI driver that you're using, or use device direct music input. You may also see if this is also set for use system timestamp. So try toggling these first 3 settings, and one of those will probably get the MIDI to be in time for you. All right, so we see question. Love this series. I usually have your stream on background company while performing tedious editing work. And precisely during one of those sessions, one doubt emerged. After a drum session, I ended up with a project with 10 songs, 12 tracks, 3 takes per song, totaling 30 takes and 360 audio events. I have hit point detection off. Is it possible to create a batch hit point detection operation on all events in selected tracks using different detection parameters? For example, if you need hit points detection on snare events, threshold 6%, bass drum events, threshold 4%, tom events, threshold 10%. I'm using Cubase Pro 12 on Windows 10. So I don't know of a way to kind of do a batch export for it. But there's really kind of, I would suggest maybe, I'm not sure if there's a specific reason that you have the hit points disabled. One of the things that you can do is just, with the automatic hit point detection enabled, there's really no consequence to having that on. if you choose not to use it, it's not going to affect the audio quality, but that way it's going to automatically kind of figure out, the basic hit point detection. So, and we could think of that the hit point detection is going to be working at the event level. So we come over here, let's go to somewhere where it has some multi-track drums. So as soon as you go here, you go to the hit points, there isn't a way to, so once you enable the hit points in, I think if you have the default, 6%, 4%, that could be different for every song, depending upon the performance. But, I think that, so you might have to do it one by one in the future. I think it's always faster to have the hit point detection enabled, and then you could tweak as you see fit. But, there isn't necessarily kind of a batch method of doing that, because the settings here are going to be for the events, and you have multiple events on the same track. So as we go into the sample editor, each file would have to be done. We can't necessarily put it for the entire track unless you consolidated all of the files into one single recording, which doesn't sound like, if you have them kind of all split up into different songs, that would probably create more issues in the long run. So I think you're going to have to switch that manually. All right, so we see question, horizontal scroll bar shift plus scroll direction is backwards in Cubase, and all other DAWs shift plus scroll down scrolls to the right, and shift plus scrolls up scrolls to the left, and only in Cubase is it vice versa. Even in Melodyne, it's the right way, which makes it even more ridiculous. If I use Melodyne in Cubase, and my Cubase window shift plus scroll down scrolls to the left, and in Melodyne window within Cubase the other way around, it's super confusing. I've been reading and writing about it in a Steinberg forum, and I'm not the only one who is super annoyed with this, but Steinberg doesn't pay attention. Someone in a forum told me that it only occurs when you use Cubase on Windows, which is my case. Why would you do such a thing to Windows users? And why can't you make it customizable, giving the user opportunity to have the directions comfortable for them? So, different programs will scroll, differently depending on your system. On Mac OS, you could change it. On Windows OS, there are some utilities that when you hold down the shift key and adjust the scroll wheel, that you can invert the direction. So I know some people will do that. I don't think every program does that, because some programs do it and others don't. Doesn't make one wrong or one right. I understand it can be frustrating, but there are some utilities, if you Google on Windows, that when holding down the shift key can invert the direction of the scroll wheel. That will work with Cubase. All right, question 2. If I try to horizontally scroll in the mix window, if a fader lane happens to be under the cursor, the fader moves. So I keep accidentally moving my faders. I think it's a function of moving faders with the mouse scroll is redundant, but I understand that you think it's very convenient, and so some of it may be, but I consistently move my faders by accident. And once again, judging by the forums, I'm not the only one. To make matters worse, for some weird reason, you decided not to include fader movements and also pan, track delay, and other parameter changes into undo history. So if I accidentally move a fader or a track delay controller, it can't be undone. So once again, why not give the user the ability to switch off this function in preferences so that my faders don't react to scroll? So you can undo. It's a different undo history. So let's say I accidentally scrolled, and if I was hovering over and I scrolled, we have this separate undo history for your mix console fader. So you have the option to undo that. And in Cubase 13, like where if we have the large format mixer where a lot of people would scroll up and down vertically. So let's say if we have multiple inserts, let's say we have our channel strip enabled and people are scrolling up and down. If we go to your preferences, now let's go to editing, project and mix console. We'll see scrolling, disable mouse wheel for parameter change. You could have that as a preference, but since like version 10 or 10.5, you could always just simply come here, and as you're working, you have a separate mix console undo history. So if you just come over to the history here, you can just simply scroll right back 3 times. So if I move this fader, move this, we can see the changes reflected here in the mix console history, and you could go back. So there is undo. It's a separate undo. So if you're doing a lot of mixing, you do an edit, you can undo the mixes independently of the edits and vice versa. So. All right. All right, so you see question, Greg, sorry to bother you again, and thanks for answering everything so far. I didn't want to take up more time and hang out with my own personal Cubase issues, so I wanted to ask you in here. Now when I try to open up projects, Cubase freezes. It's multiple projects too. It'll open one recent project I've done and none of the others. I went through and tried to see if there was plugins they had incoming that may be causing this, but everything I checked was up to date and working. When I open in safe mode, it will open up the projects fine, just obviously without all the plugins. Any ideas on how to fix this? So I think that even if you have your plugins up to date, plugins can be problematic in causing projects not to open. So what I would do is, come over perhaps and go to import tracks from project and select a particular project and open up 5 or 6 tracks at a time, and then you could isolate to find out which plugin is causing the problem. So if it opens up and runs fine with the third-party plugins disabled, it's going to be a third-party plugin that's causing it. So instead of not opening up the project, try do an import tracks from project, and open 5 or 10 tracks at a time, see if they open up and play. And then you know that those tracks are fine, and you'll be able to isolate the plugin that's causing problems pretty quickly that way. All right, let me just jump back to our live questions, see if we have some more live questions. All right. Clear my throat real quick. All right, so I just see Benny just saying, Greg, can I email you now? Again, it's too long for chat, so yeah, please email me. All right. All right, so we see Raheem just saying the Cubase index is awesome, and he definitely checked out and liked the hard disk music. So I think that's Jan's project. So. All right, so we have Ayuel just saying Happy New Year from Switzerland. Thanks for being online. All right, so we see from Steven, says, hi Greg, VZV Rack 2 plus Cubase, is there a way to send a reset when play stops? If you know, so I assume that this is maybe like a rack mount tone module. So let's go over to preferences. And let me just send a reset when play stops. So let's go to Midi and chase events. So try to just click on reset on stop. So go to Midi, preferences to Midi, and then try reset on stop. And then when Cubase stops, it should reset the Midi CCs. So let me know if that works for you, Steven. right. So we see Ali Al-Zaire asks, hello, can we MIDI transform to pitch bend specific note? So within MIDI 1.0, so probably the short answer is no, that pitch bend is going to be global. But let me we'll just come over. So, because pitch bend is going to be for all the notes on the MIDI channel. So if we come over, let me just all right, so when we play this particular track, we'll say, okay, so now if I take my pitch bend is a MIDI, is designed for all MIDI notes that it plays. Now with MIDI 2.0, or if you have MIDI system common message, so this isn't necessarily the input transformer that does it, but we could double click, and depending on the instrument, so like, HALion, Retrolog, Pad Shop, etc. What we could do now is come over, and when we go to our note expression data, that you could just come over and have note expression just on one particular note. So we can say, okay. So now as we do this, we can edit it. So, and to edit, all you'd have to do is make sure that you have this function on to double click to go into the note expression editor, and you could select tuning. So if you had a controller keyboard such as a Rolly keyboard, you could set that up as a MIDI, as an MPE device. So if we come to your studio menu, to studio setup, we can add a note expression input device. And then as you play the keys, those controllers, like the Rolly and I think Keith McMillan instruments, that you could, do pitch bend on individual notes, and Cubase could translate that into the note expression input device. But this is part of what MIDI 2.0 is going to do. We just need controllers that allow you to do it. But, for the vast majority of instruments, don't respond to MIDI 2.0 or to note expression. The Steinberg instruments will, but it's probably your controller that's not going to allow you to do it in real time. But, by default, the pitch bend will, in 99% of instruments, will automatically be global for all the MIDI notes. But you can do it with, with the correct controller, but it's not going to be the MIDI transformer that does it. All right, so we see Pablo saying WaveLab is on his wish list. So it's a great program. You'll love it. All right, you just see John Koskinen says, should he upgrade to Cubase 13 before installing Absolute 6? So, yeah, I mean, there's no reason to hold off. So they're not really contingent upon each other. All right, so we see from Tinkerman, says, Greg, your knowledge of Cubase is extremely impressive. Thank you for the live session with so many useful tips. So just glad to be able to help people. So. Okay, so we see Benny's question. So it says, if I've selected, say, 20 instruments in HALion 7, is it possible to easily get them all in separate channels, or do I have to manually set the instruments to channel 1, channel 2, channel 3? Okay. Yeah, I think that was just coming up on my list of questions I had. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I may have a project where it's all kind of loaded. All right, so let's say we come over here. All right, so I have everything kind of set up here where multiple instruments are going to play back from.
You were the party, the big event. I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited.
So you can see we have multiple instruments here. These are all kind of being mixed to the same output. So we're kind of using this as a multi-timbral device. All right, so I think what Benny wants to do is to take these to different outs. All right, so I don't know of a way to have it. I was looking earlier to see if there was a way to, save a different like output configuration, but I didn't really come up with one. I mean, as we select here, you could just very easily, say, okay, we'll select, let's say when I come here, I could select this and send it to as I go down, I could just send it to output 3, hit the select the next instrument and send it to output 4 and to output 5, etc. But let's I'll just try something here quickly. Yeah, I know you have an existing project, but let's say I'll just do a new instance of HALion. You might be able to help you for future use. So let's say we do a multi-instrument. And so if you start off with your HALion like this, so let's say we have our outputs defined. So like as you do this and you want to load up instruments, the outputs will be maintained as you drag and dropped the files in, but I don't know of a way to automatically increment the outputs here that are being used. But if you kind of start off, so say if we cut this program I'll just go ahead and cut these two programs. But as you kind of start off, if you want to save this as a multi, and I'll play around with this to see. But you could save it like as a multi preset. I think if we come here, so we'll call this Benny. All right, so, and then when you want to just open up and so you could do it like that, but I don't know of a way to automatically take like multiple slots and have it automatically increment the outputs for you automatically. I'll play around with it and see if I come up with something more for Friday, but I think you might have to manually do that. All right, always wonderful to see Graham Witcher on. He's wishing everyone had a great Christmas, so thank you so much. Michael Pierce showed a sign on the last Zoom meetup that he drove by and saw a sign for Wooten, and shared it with everyone. So, see, Michael Teams has rain and thunder, and Pablo has rain as well. Memento in Finland is wishing for rain. It's probably getting lots of snow. All right, so we have from Daja, says Cubase 13 Pro. I have a new audio/MIDI interface, a UR-RT2. It's a great interface. You'll love it. When I start a new project without my old template, it warns the old interface MIDI port isn't there, but in studio setup, the old port isn't there. So it could be that there is, when you get a message, sometimes you may get a message like, oh, we can't find this, but it could be that maybe there was a device that was, so if you go to like your MIDI device manager, that maybe one of these devices was referenced to the MIDI port. It could also be that when you get to your studio setup and look under MIDI remote controls for like generic remote or MIDI remote or Mackie control, that one of those is referencing the old MIDI interface. And, a lot of times you'll get the option to remap it, to the new port. So let's see if I open up, I may get that message on this project. I was just getting on my other computer, but we'll try. I'll close this and see if we get the message. Yeah, so you see that this missing port, MIDI in, so we could say, okay, remap it to this device. And then once you do that, then so there's probably a reference to that MIDI port for a MIDI controller or something else that you could choose to remap it to the UR-RT2 MIDI port instead. So give that a try. Okay, John Barry asks, question please, Greg. Does the Asio guard latency include the latency of the sound card in and out, or do I add them together for total latency? Thanks. So it's going to be the total latency of the system. So as you do that, so, then what the Asio guard does, if you haven't experimented with this, because realize that you probably only need, like the lowest buffer size when recording a particular track. So what Asio guard is going to allow you to do in the system is just to run the selected track at lower latencies and the other tracks run at higher latencies. So it's kind of a hybrid method so that not every single track has to be running at the lower latency if it's not actively set for record or monitor enabled. So. All right. All right, so we see Happy New Year. When Q-Link is enabled, how can multiple tracks be soloed? In Cubase 12, mute and solo buttons had the same behavior with Quick Link. All right, so let's go ahead and say I want to take these particular tracks. So I have these tracks. I'm going to activate Q-Link. So one thing you can do is, all right, so I'll just clear my mutes. So with Q-Link, I can just come over here and hit the S key and that solos, or the M key mutes. And so that will do, across all of the selected tracks. I think if you're doing it here, let's say, and Q-Link isn't turned on, I think what you do is, let's say you hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. So let's say I want to take these, I'll just clear the solo state. I want to take these, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then I think if you release the Shift key, no, it's not that one. All right. So enable, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then release the Alt or Option key, and then click, and then all the channels will be soloed just like that. So again, just come over here, select the channels, Alt or Option to engage Q-Link, then release the Alt or Option key. You can see that the Q-Link is still active by holding down Shift, and then you could click on mute or click on solo for those particular notes. So just release the Alt or Option key while holding down the Shift key. I know it's a change in behavior, so I'm not sure if that will change in a future update, but that's how you can get it to work. All right, so we see Benny just saying, thanks, Greg. All right. We have DJ Stamatis saying hello. So welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see DJ Stamatis just says sound cards Apollo Solo, HALion 7 in a program up to how many channels can I put? Everything should be Midi. So, once you load up, let's do a new project here. All right, so let's say we add an instrument track, we'll add a HALion 7. Okay, so HALion 7, we can have, let's say we'll go to our default screen set here. We can have 64 MIDI channels. So you can have 16 MIDI channels come in through a single MIDI port if you needed to record them discretely. You could also, but as if you wanted to load up 64 HALion sounds and play one controller to record them all layered together, you could do that very easily. But when we come to HALion 7, we can see that when we go to like the MIDI channel, that we could choose, up to 4 different MIDI ports. So let's say, while we come here, we'll load up a quick patch. Okay. We can see that this is port A. We have 16 MIDI channels on port A. Port B, we have 16 MIDI channels. Port C and port D. So we have 64 MIDI channels at once. So if you have one MIDI port, you can record and have HALion playback on 64 discrete MIDI channels in one instance. You could run multiple instances of that if needed. But, where multiple ins can make a big difference is if you have, like 20 different controller keyboards and you wanted to have access, and you wanted to play different sounds from different MIDI controllers. That's where having more MIDI inputs can make a big difference when working with virtual instruments. But I think you're fine with just a single MIDI port if you're recording one instrument at a time. If you want to record 4 instruments at a time, you would have to get like a MIDI through box to connect those instruments if you're using the MIDI input on your Apollo versus a USB connection, which is very common these days. So it depends really how many tracks you want to record at the same time. It can make the big difference. All right, so we see from Dajas, it says, thanks, Greg, that solved it. All right. All right, let me just jump over. We had a couple more questions that were mailed in. We'll get to those. All right. So we see, hi, Greg. Here's a question from me again. Soren in Sweden. Cubase Pro 13, Wavelab 11.1, or is it 0.2? Spectral layers 10 Pro. All right. I have bought a plugin from Hornet named Magnus. It shows intersample true peak among other. It's for sale now, costing about €4. My question is about the intersample true peak. I don't know much about it. Can Cubase, Wavelab, Spectral layers display it somewhere? It is apparently different than true peak and supervision or the meter in the control room. What is your word about it? Apparently Steinberg, Cubase brick wall limiter, and the intersample awareness of some sort. What does that do? If you specify it, how much should you care about getting it below 0? Pro mixes often don't care, so it seems. And is below 0 the place to be if you care? What makes it possible to adjust it? The brick wall limiter changes, but the value a small amount. I hope you could bring clarity to my questions. Happy New Year, and have a nice continuation. It says, and he also said that he responded to the Steinberg survey, so that's a great thing to do. If you get a chance, you can send feedback to Steinberg. They emailed out a number of surveys. So let's talk about intersample distortion. So we'll just jump back to, I think we had an example kind of set here. All right. All right, so let's look at a particular audio file here. So what I could do is I'm going to just process like too much gain on one particular audio clip here. So I'm going to come, let's take this clip where you can see it's not peaking. And I want to, we'll go to my audio menu. Let's go to processes. Let's go to gain. And let's add like 24 dB gain on that selection. All right. All right, so we see that it's detected the clip. All right, so the clip has been detected. So we go to look at it now, and when we look at the audio, we can see that the audio, when we look at the audio, when you see it represented here, what can often happen is as we see this being represented, right, is that this is clipping. So that there is audio that can go like out of these realms, like beyond this. And sometimes we could see this in Wavelab. Let's come here, let's edit in Wavelab. All right, and let's look at our waveform here. So when we go down to the sample level, we will now just kind of come over. So sometimes what we see that we have, 0 dB here. But what you may see in an intersample clip is, and it's probably just truncating it because I'm not doing a 32-bit float, but you could have between the sample, the audio kind of exceed this. So where it could exceed 0 between this point to this point to this point is one sample. So audio sometimes can exceed this and cause distortion. Now, to mitigate that, and when it makes a difference is when you're playing it back on different conversion stages on different devices. So let's say you're playing it back on your phone. Like if you're listening to it on a high quality system with high quality converters, you may not notice this distortion. If you're listening to it on your tablet or in your car radio, you compress it down to like an MP3, that's when these distortions become very apparent. So when we go to particular functions in Cubase here, we'll say, let's look at a couple of the plugins that can make kind of a difference. So to kind of make sure that the sample isn't clipping in between the samples that can cause problems on playback on other devices when using different effects here. So we'll go to our inserts. With the razor, we could activate the detect the intersample clipping. So a lot of times when you're doing true peak, it's only going to show you what the peak is, but it can't really go in between the samples per se. And here we could set our ceiling for the particular samples. When you go to our brick wall limiter, we could here also activate the intersample distortion so that it can do the limiting and not cause those peaks in between the different samples. So for a lot of times you may not notice it in kind of a professional audio playback system, but when you take those files and compress them for different delivery formats, when you do other and you're playing it back through lower quality hardware, that's when it sounds distorted. And the reason why people could look at it and say, oh, it's not really clipping here between, I look at the samples, but it could be actually between one sample that's causing the clip, that's causing the distortion. So, all right, let's jump back to live questions here. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. See how we're doing. All right. All right, so we see Greg, the Razor plugin has really high latency just for the aggressive setting. Could this be addressed in an update, or is it just the nature of the beast? Cheers. So, I think let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say we have the Razor here. So let's just put it in. So, I think a lot of people, when you're doing limiting, so the aggressive does jump up. It could be that, as it's doing that, the aggressive, that it might have to, it could be taking, more processing power for that particular algorithm for the speed of it, which can cause a higher latency for the processing. So, I think a lot of people are kind of using this during the mix down phase, especially when doing kind of aggressive functions with the razor and, maybe aren't tracking with it. But I'll pass it along and see if it is something that could be addressed in a future update, but it might be kind of the nature of the beast where if you go to manual, you can see that this would go to 2.6 milliseconds, and then aggressive, when we jump up to there, that's going to increase it to 70 milliseconds. But I think a lot of people, in fairness, are kind of using this for the mix down process, so it may not be as critical for low latency. But I know some people would want to use it for tracking during vocals and stuff. See, Michael Pierce just says, silly thought, all sound designers, whether they be for internal plugins or external ones, like to make loud sounds. So, all right, so we see Sarin just says, thanks, Greg, about the inner sample peaks. All right, so we see from Daniela Tocan, so great to have you on the live stream. Happy New Year. So just a question, is it possible to demonstrate a typical drum sound of Phil Collins with convolution reverb, EQ, gating, compression? I tried outside Cubase and used RMX 16 responses. How is the way in Cubase? So it's really, how a lot of gated reverbs were done was just kind of doing a gate. So putting a big reverb and then putting a gate on it. So let's see if we could come up with an appropriate part. All right, so let's see if we can. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here, let's see, I'll just use kind of maybe even. So let's say I want this snare. Here we go to like the mixer in Cubase. So let's go to my aux sends. So I want to go to my reverb. All right, and we will edit the reverb. So we want to make this like a really kind of a large reverb. All right, and I'm going to go to, let's say, agent. I'm going to select the snare here. So let's say I want to do it on my snare. All right, so when we do this, we're going to go to aux send 1. All right, let's go to the aux send here. All right, and let's set our threshold. So this is just manually putting the gate. After the reverb. So you can kind of just play around. So if you wanted to do this, let's say we'll just solo the snare here. I'll get rid of this processing. So we'll just... Alright, so I'm just going to solo the snare track here. And then if we wanted to come here, let's do convolution reverb. So we'll do just a bit of, we'll go to reverence, and we'll put in like a large... So let's say maybe we'll try a 4-second plate. So now I can go to this return channel. So, you know, it just basically is taking a really large reverb and giving you the attack of that reverb without really, just by gating the reverb return channel. So you could do it on the actual channel strip, or if you wanted to do it as a gate plugin under dynamics. So you could just kind of do stuff like that. That's just kind of an easy way to kind of dial in the gated reverb sound. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right. All right, wonderful to see that Gareth has made it. All right, so Michael Pierce just says, can we have a plugin which just brings everything down to minus 18 dB FS-ish? Of course, we could pregame, but it can only take absolute ages, feeling lazy. So, you know, if you have a, you know, like you may not even have to do it during gain staging if the final product is, you know, so let's say if we jump to here, let's say I want to take like the track with the way too big reverb on the snare, and I was going to release this, so you can say, okay, I want to take this track, you know, at the very end process, you could just kind of come over here and say normalize. So let's go to your processes to normalize and say, let's do loudness normalize to minus 18 LUFS. And now the track will be normalized to minus 18 LUFS. So you could always just quickly do offline processing on your final mix. I know people go crazy trying to get, you know, to a particular LUFS value. I'm like, oh, why don't you just normalize it to LUFS at the very end? You know, you could be one or two off, and then, just easily just kind of fix it right there at the last stage. So maybe that might work. All right, I'm glad that Gareth got both of the bass tracks. All right. All right, so Uncle Airy, just wishing everyone a Happy New Year. All right. All right, see that Michael is very happy that Gareth is on. Gareth says the mixer and groove agent is very versatile. All right. See, Graham Witcher is just saying, do I hear another Hot Mess album on the horizon then? So I think it's probably started, so a little bit. So I added some bass tracks, so I think we all got excited after Christmas songs that we did. And Gareth wants to remind everyone to close your gates if you don't want your goats to escape. So it's always a good text, a good credo. He says that's the new name of the third Hot Mess record. So we have to have a concept album on goats escaping. They all escaped Texas, apparently. All right, just reading through different comments. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. So we see, kind of the classic gated reverb sound was actually kind of an accident, but some of the greatest sounds are. So Gareth asks, how was my Christmas? So we had a very wonderfully relaxed, very chill Christmas. So it was nice to decompress from work for a bit. So it was great to have a week off and able to get some bass tracks in for Gareth and future Hot Mess projects. So future Hot Mess projects. So it's nice to have that without having work stuff. All right. Wonderful to see Jay from Secret Studios on. All right. We'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. Everyone's just kind of getting back into the work mode. Make sure I got through all the questions that were sent in advance. I think we're at 99 likes, so if there's one more person can hit the like button, that'd be great. All right, so I think we got through all the mailed in questions. Let's just jump back, see if there's any more that sneak in. All right, so we have a question. In the visibility section, multi-outputs of instruments are not shown. Why is that different from Cubase 12? All right, so let's go ahead and just do a new project here with some multi-outs. Okay, so let's say these are all going to different outs. I will go ahead and add a couple MIDI tracks. All right, so let's say these are routed to different outputs. All right, so just read the question. In the visibility section, multi-outs of instruments are not shown. Why is that different from Cubase 12? All right, so let's get to the visibility tab. All right, so it could be that when we go to like the inspector here, so let's say if we are so, I don't think that those would show up because they're not actual tracks. But I think, now with the inspector that we could choose the particular output that we're going for as well. So let's say if we come here, we could choose our different outputs there, but let me just see if this is different compared to version 12. I think it might be the same, but we'll just make sure. All right, so I'll just add an instrument track here, and all right, we'll go to the mixer, set these to different outs. All right, so when we get to our visibility, we don't necessarily see the outputs here. Let's add our MIDI tracks. So it looks to be similar to me. So let's go, there's slot 1, slot 2, slot 3, slot 4. Let's come over here. Let's add in our MIDI track. So it looks to be kind of the same for the visibility settings here. So it looks similar to me from version 12 to version 13. Let me know if I did something different, but it looks... All right, let's go into the next question. Okay, I see Michael Pierce wants, says like, and he wants people, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like. All right, so we see Danielle Tocan says they were in Hamburg at the Chaos Computer Club Hacker Conference. So I miss going to Hamburg. Hope to get back there soon. All right. So Gareth asks, could you show assigning CC values to individual MIDI channel notes? Perhaps there's some extra features here we don't know about. All right, so maybe this is kind of with note expressions. Let me just load up instrument here. All right, let's all right, so say we have typical FM brass kind of patch. Reads. So assigning CC values to individual MIDI channel notes, perhaps there's some extra features. So let's see if this is with note expression. So okay, so let's say I want to install this for CC1 for modulation. So let's say so let's say tuning. I want this to go to aftertouch. Okay, so let's say now if I record in, all right, so let's see if I could just record in. I'm going to do aftertouch. So here's where you could kind of set up your input to record the aftertouch, and where you could set up the different MIDI CCs to transmit different. So like on my controller, I don't have polyphonic aftertouch, but if I had polyphonic aftertouch, I could have I could play each note, like I have a Roland A80 controller, and I could play each note, and if I hold down different polyphonic aftertouch on different notes, and I just have kind of not a polyphonic aftertouch, just regular aftertouch, but if I do that, each note I could set it up for different, like pitch, or different functions right here, but my controller doesn't have polyphonic aftertouch on it. Yeah, so you see Garrett just kind of says, pitch bending just one note of a chord by giving a different MIDI channel. So, and if you wanted to also come over here to the MIDI track itself, we can just say I want it to go to my track inspector. So as soon as we do this, we could open a panel and say I only want pitch bend, so let's filter, and we'll say controller, So we'll say we'll filter, it's equal to, let's say, pitchbend. And we'll say unequal to channel 1. So this way, only MIDI channel 1 will get pitchbend information. So you could use that kind of in conjunction with the pitch, with the, so if you wanted to send it to different controllers, you could set up your MIDI input transformer to do that. Okay, so you see from WIDI music, how come I can't colorize the mixer channel behind the fader anymore? All right, so let's look at our mixer here. So the channel, like the outline here, is what is kind of changed. Let's just go ahead and come over here to the preferences and make sure I have the preferences set. So we'll go to, all right, so now when we come over, so it's really kind of more of the outline that's going to be colorized, and this way it's easier to kind of see the metering. So if we choose the mix console channels, we could come over and let's go ahead and apply that. So we can now just come over and see that, but people would complain about the clarity on the metering and the scale. So I think that's why it might have been changed. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. When adding a new instrument, is it possible to have a list of favorites rather than all the instruments that you own? So what you could do is you can go to your studio menu and go to your VST plugin manager, and you could click on this little plus sign, and now we could make you can make your own collection, but you can say copy the current collection, and we'll say copy, and we'll just call this my favorites. Okay, and I can say I want this out here, I want it the grand, and I want it Groove Agent and HALion Sonic Retrolog. So now if I wanted to just say let's delete that folder, delete this, there's what we call my faves. And now we could just come over here, we can say, okay, I want to go to David M's, I want to go to my faves. And now every time I go here, I'm seeing not every plugin that's available in my system, but my favorites. Or if I want to go to default, I can see them all categorized if you want. So again, you can click on your plus sign. You could make a new collection, drag them over, or make a copy of your existing one, and then just kind of organize it as you see fit. All right, so Daniela is just asking if someone here uses Dante, so I've used Dante a lot. All right, Benny asks, question, enable, disable track with key command. I want to mark a track and enable or disable with a button. So you could do that. So let's say we have our HALion loaded here. So if you go under your key commands, what we could do is we'll go to edit to key commands. I think it's under the audio category, and you'll see disable, enable instrument, disable, enable track. So that's the key command. So if I wanted to assign that to my MIDI remote, I'll come here to my Korg Nano control, and let me just switch my mapping page. So now I'll just come over here. Let's choose to disable / enable. Yeah, and even though it's in the audio category, it works for virtual instruments as well. So now I could come here, I hit the button, and the track is enabled, disabled just by either a key command or a MIDI remote operation. So again, come over to key commands and disable enable track, and then you could set a key command or do it via MIDI remote with the mapping assistant. And also under audio, disable enable track. All right, great to see Roger on. Wishing everyone a happy new 2024. All right, so we have a question. Is there an easy way to take a MIDI track into an audio? Let me just... Yeah, so there's a number of different ways. One is, so let's say if I have different sounds here. You know, one easy way to do it, most common way, is probably just go to edit to render in place. You'll have different options if you want to include different signal events. You could say render. And if you don't have it record enabled, that helps. Let's go to edit, render in place. I can go to render settings and render. And then you could just create the audio just like that. If you want to add an audio track, another way, if you wanted to capture it in real time, go to the audio inputs and we could select our track instruments. So we'll say HALion Sonic SE is our input and just hit record. And you could just do it just like that. So render in place, or just set the instrument as the input for an audio track. Will both work pretty quickly for that. All right. So you see Gareth has finally bought an Aftertouch controller. Congratulations. Which one did you get? Did you get the Samson one? I think you're talking about in the last Zoom meetup. All right, so we see, is there something in Cubase integrated for virtual loopback function without third-party plugins, if you know how to set up? So, you know, one of the things that you get, I think you're on Mac OS, but one of the things that you can get for your Mac OS is if you go into your audio MIDI setup and activate the IAC driver. So let's go here to Finder. Let's go to Applications, to Utilities, to Audio MIDI Setup. And then here you could activate the IAC driver. So let me just switch to... So you could just activate the IAC driver, and then you could use that as a loopback device. So it's part of the Mac OS operating system. Okay, so we see just clarifications as I was talking about the instruments with the multi-outs. Says I was talking about the subfolder of an instrument and multi-outputs. All right, so let's say if we're here and we get to the visibility, let me activate some virtual outs here. All right, and let me see if these are kind of loaded up with different sounds. They're all set for different. All right, so, but it seems, yeah, so I mean, it seems the same, but if you want to send me just like a screenshot of what you're talking about, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, great to see Jazzy Lamel on. See Eric DeBeardo just says problem solved. Thanks, Greg. Glad to help. Garrett says the trick with the input transformer is a Pandora's box. All right. See, Pablo is getting lentils. That sounds good. I had lentils yesterday for lunch. All right, so we see from Midi Music just says, how can I use Project Logical Editor to access additional configurations? 8 is pretty limiting for a large scoring session. So I'm not sure if you need, like if we have configurations here. So let me just duplicate these here real quick. Times. Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's 9 altogether total, but sometimes in large scoring sessions, I know obviously people will work with it with setting up folders. So many times people will utilize folders and say, okay, I want to see only these particular folders, and use that kind of in conjunction with configurations. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding the configurations here. But now if we move these to a folder track, and we move these to folder, and let's say these last 3, so a lot of people I know will just, so let's say we have folders set up for large templates, and then you could just come over here and see only those. Hold down the shift key, and you can say, okay, I want to only see this folder and expand, only see this. So a lot of people I know will utilize their folders and say, okay, I want to see only that folder and expand. So, but obviously there's people that have 4,000 or 5,000 tracks that seem to be able to work pretty quickly with it. Okay. Okay, so Ivan Garcia just says hi. Welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see question, how to select vertically multiple events between locators without using the lasso, because lasso selects all lanes in each track when shift plus up down sometimes selects events outside of location. All right, so let me just go to a different project here. All right, so let me activate this project. All right, so let's say I want to select all of the events here. So it could be one of the things you might want to do is just go to edit. You know, there is kind of a, I think under functions we could do split loop. And now we could just shift arrow up and down like that. But you could, you know, in that way that negates the need. I'm just going to reread the question. So how to select vertically between locators without using lasso. Yeah, so if you want it to always work, you know, just come over here and split between. So under functions, try just using the split loop function, and then you could select all of the events kind of within like so. So give that a shot. All right, so we have Ismail just from Cape Town says, tell me how to get Midi from audio. So if you wanted to, you know, it's set up to kind of work with monophonic audio sources. So if I wanted to take this particular event, like let's say a bass line, so it's not really designed to work with chords. But if we want to take this, we go into our sample editor and go to Vary Audio. So we'll have it do its analysis. So you do like for vocals or bass parts or synth leads. And you'll see under functions here, choose functions, extract Midi. And we could assign it to first selected track or create a new Midi track, hit OK. And now we could see the Midi from the bass part. So once again, go to audio for monophonic sources. At this point, go to Vary Audio, do its analysis, and under functions, extract Midi. All right, so you see a question. Do you have any information regarding the missing reload track preset button that was present in Cubase 12? So I know I reported that in. So, you know, I know it's currently not in there, but I did report it. I know that they were investigating perhaps bringing it back. But I think a lot of people would do that to reload the track preset, and did that before you could hit a keyboard shortcut for enable, disable tracks. So if you're utilizing it for, you know, freeing up system resources, you know, consider maybe just using the enable, disable track function. I think it'll get you there get you to the same spot. All right, see. All right, so we see if there's any more questions that come in. Looks like we're at the end of the questions list. See if there's any more. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. Thanks everyone for all the great questions. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back on Friday afternoon starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Give it another minute or so, and there's usually a bit of a delay from when I talk to when you guys hear. See comment from Gareth that the new key command window is far better. I like the ability to be able to actually execute the macros from there. All right. So we see Gareth and Benny saying we'll see you on Friday. So give it another 30 seconds, and if there's not any more questions, we'll wrap up. Gareth is wishing everyone a Grammy New Year. So. All right, so we see just a quick question from Jazz Dude. Any changes in 2024 to the schedule? So I think we'll be maintaining the same schedule towards the end of January. I will be at the NAMM show, so I may miss 3 or so live streams towards the end of the month, but I don't have any other trips kind of planned after that, so we should be doing the normal Tuesday, Friday, so that'll be kind of the same. So we'll still be doing 2 times a week, 4 hours. So I think, we had 2.6 million views, 2.6 million hours viewed of the live streams last year. So people seem to like it. All right, with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, everyone, for all the wonderful questions. And if you have questions you want to send it in advance, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I appreciate everyone's spending part of the start of your new year learning more about Cubase and Steinberg products. And we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we will see you then. Take care. Goodbye.